The wind in Arizona doesn't whisper. It scrapes. It claws the skin, fills every breath with grit and memory. That afternoon, the sun was a dull coin buried behind a wall of dust, and the road to nowhere stretched like an open wound. Jonas Crow rode alone, the horse moving steady, the saddle creaking like an old man's bones. He had learned to live with silence ever since the war took his home, his wife, and the part of him that still believed in prayer. He didn't expect to see anyone on that road, not this far out. But through the orange haze, something moved a flicker, small and desperate. He slowed the horse, a girl maybe 19 staggering under a child half her size. Two more kids clung to the tail of a broken cart, their faces crusted with dust and fear. The oldest one turned as the wind hit her again. Her eyes were dry, not because she didn't want to cry, but because she'd run out of tears weeks ago. Jonas said nothing at first, just watched. The girl tried to speak, but her voice came out as sand. "Please, we just need water." He looked around the empty horizon, the dying mule, the useless cart, then back at her. His jaw tightened. Something in him wanted to keep riding. He'd promised himself years ago, no more saving, no more strays, no more pain. But the boy behind her coughed, small shoulders shaking. Jonas exhaled slowly. Then he spoke, not soft, not cruel, just final. "You either get in or die out here." The girl blinked, unsure if she heard right. He didn't repeat. He simply leaned down, grabbed the nearest kid by the collar, and lifted him onto the horse. For a moment, time held still, only wind and heartbeat. The girl looked at him again, searching his face for something: pity, reason, maybe humanity. She found none. He turned away, motioning to the wagon hitched behind. "There's room. Don't waste it." She hesitated because when you've spent your whole life being left behind, trust feels like walking into fire. But the baby on her shoulder whimpered, and that was enough. She pushed the others toward the wagon. Jonas climbed back on his horse, eyes fixed on the road ahead. As the storm swallowed them, his voice cut through the roar of wind, more to himself than anyone else. "God help me. Not again." In that single line lay the truth. This wasn't a rescue. It was a relapse, the first crack in a wall he'd built from guilt and dust. Behind him, the girl whispered something the wind carried away. Maybe thank you. Maybe just please. Either way, it sounded like the beginning of something neither of them wanted, but both of them needed: a fragile kind of salvation, born in the storm. The road east bent through a valley of dead mesquite, the air still heavy with the storm's red breath. The mule's hooves sank in the sand, and the wheels groaned like an old prayer. No one spoke. The only sound was the wind, brushing over them like a hand too tired to comfort. Jonas rode ahead, shoulders rigid, hat pulled low. Behind him, the girl held the reins of the wagon as if gripping her own fate. The three children huddled under a blanket that smelled of smoke and horse sweat, their eyes wide and shining like tiny lanterns in the dusk. Every few miles, Jonas looked back, not at them, but at the sky, gauging the next storm. Yet each glance found the same thing: four figures clinging to each other, refusing to fade. He told himself it was just precaution, nothing more. Men like him didn't care. Not anymore. The youngest boy started coughing again, dry and sharp. The sound snapped through the air. Without turning, Jonas reached into his coat, pulled out a dented flask, and tossed it backward. The girl caught it on instinct. "Water," he said. "Nothing else." She nodded, though he never saw it. The kids drank in small sips, passing it like a holy relic. When it came back empty, she stared at the metal for a long time before tucking it into her skirt pocket, as if the shape of it meant safety. Miles passed. The sun sank behind the ridge, leaving the world in bruised light. The wagon creaked louder, begging for mercy. One of the wheels cracked, but Jonas didn't stop. He knew that in this country, stopping was a kind of death. When the girl finally spoke, her voice was hoarse, the sound of wind scraping through a hollow place. "Where are you taking us?" "Home," he answered. The word fell strange from his tongue. He hadn't used it in years. She studied his back, the scar that ran from neck to shoulder, a line of old violence. "Why?" He didn't answer. Maybe he didn't know. Maybe because the silence in that question hurt more than the dust in his lungs. The night came fast. Stars blinked through the haze like bullet holes in the sky. Jonas slowed the horse, found a dry patch between two rocks, and spoke at last. "We camp here." The girl climbed down, legs shaking. She set the children near the wagon, then knelt to light a small fire. Her hands trembled, striking the flint again and again until a thin spark caught. Jonas watched from his saddle, silent, letting her fight with the match until she won. When the flame took hold, he dismounted, tied the horse, and dropped a bundle of wood beside her. "You'll need more," he said. "I can manage." "I didn't say you couldn't." She looked up then, catching something almost human in his eyes before he turned away. The line between command and kindness was thin, and he walked it like a man afraid of falling. The fire grew, licking at the night. The children edged closer, soaking in the warmth. Jonas took off his coat, heavy with dust and memory, and laid it over them. One of the kids mumbled a word he hadn't heard in years. "Sir." He flinched, though the boy meant no harm. Respect was a language he'd forgotten. Later, when the children slept, the girl whispered across the fire, "You got a name?" He hesitated, then answered, "Jonas." "Mine's Nora." He nodded once. "Figures. What's that supposed to mean?" "Just sounds like a name for someone who keeps people alive." "Oh." She smiled, barely. It was small, raw, and real, the kind of smile that happens only when a soul finds a crack to breathe through. The wind softened. The desert around them seemed less cruel, as if it too exhaled. Jonas sat a while longer, staring into the fire. He thought of the past he'd buried, the house that burned, the cries he couldn't silence. He remembered the last time he tried to save someone and how it ended. But tonight, with these strangers asleep under his coat, something shifted. It wasn't redemption. Not yet. Just the faint ache of responsibility returning to a man who'd sworn he'd never feel again. When the fire burned low, Nora whispered, "Thank you." Jonas didn't reply. He only added another log, the sparks rising like prayers. Discipline, he told himself. That's all this is. Just discipline. But as he watched the flame steady itself against the wind, he knew the truth. Every act of control was really an act of care, disguised to survive. And in the quiet between heartbeats, the road ahead finally felt less empty. By the time the wagon rolled through the crooked gate of Crow Ranch, dawn had already peeled the stars off the sky. The place looked less like a home and more like a memory. A handful of wooden posts, a roof half collapsed, the wind moving through it like it belonged there. The corral fence leaned sideways, and a single horse stood in it, ribs showing like lines in a map no one reads anymore. Jonas dismounted first, slow and stiff, every bone announcing its age. He pointed toward the cabin. "You'll find water by the barrel. Stove works if you know how to talk to it. Nora climbed down, carrying the smallest child who was still asleep, his cheek pressed against her shoulder. The other two followed, dragging their feet across the red dirt. When they stepped inside the cabin, a smell of old smoke and rain-soaked timber greeted them. It wasn't much. One bed, one table. Dust thicker than faith. But after weeks of sleeping under open sky, even walls felt like a miracle. Jonas set his rifle by the door and began unstrapping the mule, moving with the kind of efficiency that doesn't ask for help. Nora watched him a moment, then quietly started sweeping the floor with a broken broom she'd found behind the stove. He looked over his shoulder. "You don't have to do that." "I know." She kept sweeping. "But dirt don't wait for permission." Something in her tone made him pause, the same quiet defiance that had kept her alive out there. He didn't say another word. By afternoon, the air inside changed. Dust still clung to the corners, but sunlight pushed through the cracks, catching in the strands of Nora's hair. The children laughed once short. Awkward. As if testing whether the sound was allowed here. Jonas fixed the pump outside, coaxing water until it gurgled up clean. When he came back in, Nora was stirring a pot of beans over the fire. The smell filled the small room, thick with warmth and something unspoken. He set a bucket by her feet. "That'll hold till night." "Thank you," she said, wiping her hands. "Didn't think this place had water left." "Most things do. You just have to dig deeper than you want to." She nodded, not sure if he meant the land or himself. The youngest girl, Lucy, tugged at Jonas's coat. "Mister, is this your house?" "Was," he said. "What happened?" He hesitated. "Weather." Time. A few bad decisions. Nora caught the look in his eyes and quickly changed the subject. Lucy, go wash up. Use the bucket by the door. The girl ran off. Jonas gave a small, grateful nod he didn't expect her to notice. She did. As evening came, they ate in near silence. The children devoured everything. Nora ate last, chewing slow, grateful, but cautious. When she glanced at Jonas, he was staring into the fire again, the same way he had the night before, as if searching for someone inside it. She wanted to ask about the picture on the mantel, a woman with kind eyes and a baby in her arms, but the words stuck. Some ghosts don't need names to fill a room. Later, when the children fell asleep on a blanket near the hearth, Nora stood outside. The desert was quiet, painted silver under the moon. She breathed in the cold, steady air, the first breath in months that didn't taste of fear. Jonas joined her, holding 2 tin mugs. Coffee, he said. If you can call it that. Oh, she took it, sipped, winced at the bitterness. You live out here alone? Been easier that way. Still is? He looked at her, long and unreadable. Ask me tomorrow. For a while, they stood side by side, not speaking. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It just was. A language without grammar, but with meaning all the same. Inside, a log cracked in the fire. The kids stirred, murmured in dreams. Jonas turned to go back in, but Nora's voice stopped him. You didn't have to take us. He half smiled, eyes on the horizon. You think I did it for you? She frowned, unsure. I needed the noise, he said softly. Quiet gets loud after too long. Something in her chest shifted. Not pity, not debt, just recognition. 2 people who'd both lived with ghosts now shared a roof, and somehow that made the ghosts quieter. When they went back inside, Jonas draped his coat over the children again, then sat against the wall, rifle across his knees. Nora lay on the floor, eyes open, watching the fire's reflection dance on the ceiling. It wasn't comfort, not yet, but it was safety. And as the wind outside softened to a hum, the house seemed to breathe with them as if the old walls, too, were learning how to live again. Spring in Arizona doesn't come gently. It sneaks up one morning in the smell of wet dust and the slow return of color to the land. The mesquite trees bloomed again, and the creek behind Crow Ranch began to whisper where it had once gone silent. For the first time in years, Jonas felt the rhythm of a household, hammering fence posts with small hands passing him nails, Nora's voice calling the children to supper, the laughter echoing against the canyon walls. The house had found a pulse again, slow, irregular, but alive. That peace lasted 3 weeks. It ended the way most peace does not, with thunder, but with the crunch of tires on dry gravel. Jonas looked up from the field, saw a dust cloud moving toward the ranch. He knew the shape before the badge appeared. Marshall Everett. The law had the posture of someone who believed he was always right, and a face that had never softened for a stranger. He stopped the car near the porch, stepped out, hat low against the Sunday. Jonas Crow. Jonas didn't bother wiping the sweat off his brow. Marshall. The man's gaze slid past him to the doorway, where Nora stood with the children half hidden behind her skirt. You've been busy, Everett said. 3 kids, 1 woman, no papers. Jonas kept his voice flat. They're not mine. Exactly the problem. The marshal flipped open a folder, the pages yellowed and stiff. Town clerk says a young woman named Nora Lee and 3 minors were seen leaving a burned settlement north of here. No guardians. The county's moving them to a proper facility. Safer that way. Nora stepped forward. We're safe here. Everett didn't even look at her. Not the point, miss. State needs order. Can't have folks collecting strays. He glanced at Jonas again. You, of all people, should understand rules. Something cold passed between them, a history written in a language only men who'd seen war could read. Jonas took a slow breath. They stay till I hear it from the judge himself. That's not how it works. Everett's tone carried the weight of the badge. You can't just build yourself a family out here. Jonas's hand curled around the fence post. Wasn't building anything, then it won't hurt to let them go. Nora's pulse hammered in her ears. The children pressed closer to her legs. She didn't cry. She'd learned that tears never moved men like Everett. But her silence did something else. It made Jonas step between them. She's under my roof, he said. That makes her my responsibility. Everett tilted his head. Careful with that word, Crow. You know what responsibility got you last time. Jonas's jaw locked. The marshal had reached too far back into the year when Jonas's own wife had died in childbirth, when the county doctor blamed him for negligence, when no one in town would say his name without a pause after it. I'll talk to the judge, Jonas said. Everett smirked. You do that. But if I come back in a week and they're still here, I'll have no choice. He tipped his hat, turned, and left the way he came. The dust swallowed him whole. For a long time, no one spoke. Then Nora's voice, small but steady. He'll take them. Jonas didn't answer. He walked to the porch, sat down, elbows on his knees, staring at the horizon as if the solution might rise from it. Inside, the children whispered about the man with the shiny star, about what facility meant. Nora tucked them into bed early, her hands shaking when she reached for the blanket. When the house finally went quiet, she stepped outside. Jonas was still there, unmoving, a shadow among shadows. You should have told me, she said. About what? That you've got ghosts in this county too. He didn't look at her. Ghosts don't talk unless you listen. Maybe it's time you did. He gave a dry laugh. You think words change law? No, she said. But they change people. That caught him. He turned, eyes tired but sharp. You really think I can fix this? I think you already started. The wind rose then, carrying the smell of rain. Nora looked out at the fence line, at the endless open world that wanted to scatter them again. They'll come back, she whispered. I know. What will you do? He stood, bones creaking, picked up his hat. What I should have done a long time ago, stop running. Over the next few days, Jonas rode to town at dawn and came back after dark, papers folded in his pocket, dust covering his boots. He didn't speak about what he'd done, but Nora saw the worry threading through his silence. Each night, the children asked if they'd be sent away. Each night, she told them no. But she could feel time closing in, the kind that leaves marks. On the sixth evening, she found Jonas by the corral, mending a broken rail. His hands were raw, his eyes sunken. You can't fight everyone, she said. I don't have to. Just one man who forgot what mercy looks like. He drove another nail into the wood, the sound echoing across the field like gunfire. Then he looked up at her, expression unreadable. Whatever happens, he said, don't run again. I won't. The sky turned dark behind them, storm clouds building heavy and slow. Inside the cabin, the children slept close together, unaware of how thin the line of safety had become. Jonas stood at the doorway, watching the lightning crawl across the horizon, and knew the storm wasn't coming from the sky this time. The rain arrived before dawn. It came slow at first, whispering against the tin roof, then thickened into a steady drumming that blurred the line between night and morning. The desert smelled of iron and forgiveness. Inside the cabin, the fire had gone out, leaving only the soft breathing of three children tangled under a single blanket. Nora lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Every drop that hit the roof felt like a second slipping away. She'd heard Jonas pacing outside half the night, boots scraping the porch, then silence. She knew what that silence meant. The papers he'd filed in town hadn't worked. The law wasn't built for mercy. She sat up quietly, careful not to wake the kids, and began to pack the few things they had. A worn shawl, a half loaf of bread, a tin of matches, the tiny carved horse Jonas had whittled for the boy. She hesitated on that one, thumb tracing the grain of the wood, then slipped it into her pocket. Outside, the storm rolled low across the sky. The horizon looked like an argument between darkness and dawn. When she opened the door, Jonas was already there, sitting on the steps, rain soaking his shoulders. He didn't look at her. You think leaving fixes it? She froze. I didn't hear you. You weren't supposed to. He turned then, eyes hollow but steady. You'd walk them into another storm after I dragged you out of the last one? I can't let you lose your land over us. Her voice cracked, but she steadied it. You did enough. Enough for who? For people who don't belong here. Oh. He stood, slow and deliberate, as if every word was another nail driven into his own resolve. You think belonging comes from paper? You think that badge means anything out here? It means he'll come back, she said. And when he does, he'll take us. Maybe you too. Jonas's jaw flexed. Let him try. Don't. she whispered. You don't have to be my savior. He stepped closer, rain dripping from his hat brim. You ever think maybe I need to be? The air between them hummed with something heavier than thunder. She looked away first, staring at the wet earth. You said you didn't want noise. That quiet was easier. Yeah, he said. And then you brought it back. For a long moment, neither moved. Then she reached for his hand, just briefly, her fingers cold and shaking. Thank you, she said, for giving them a place to rest. He didn't stop her when she turned toward the wagon. The children stirred, confused, half asleep as she bundled them up and led them out into the rain. The mule brayed softly, reluctant. Jonas watched from the porch, motionless except for the twitch of his hand, the smallest rebellion against stillness. He told himself to let her go. That's what he'd done before. That's how you survive loss. By staying behind. But when the smallest girl looked back and waved, something tore inside him, clean, painful, necessary. The kind of break that heals crooked but strong. He stepped off the porch, walked into the rain, and reached the wagon before she could climb up. You're heading east, he said. River's flooded. You won't make it 3 miles. Then we'll find another way. He grabbed the reins, eyes sharp now. No, you won't. Her shoulders squared. You can't keep us here. I can try. The argument hung there, suspended between pride and fear. Then Jonas pulled off his coat, the same one that had covered them that first night, and threw it over her shoulders. She tried to hand it back, but he just said, Keep it. Storm's colder than it looks. He turned to walk away, but her voice caught him. Why help us, Jonas? He stopped, half in shadow. Rain dripped from his hat brim like tears he refused to shed. Because once, he said quietly, no one did for me. The words hit harder than the rain. She stared at him, understanding now that his silence had never been cruelty. It was the sound of a man who'd lost everything and still chose to offer what little he had left. He motioned toward the house. Come back in when the rain stops. But she didn't answer. The wagon lurched forward, wheels sinking in the mud. He watched until the shape of it blurred into the gray morning, then turned away. Back inside, the house felt emptier than before. Not quiet, but hollow. The fire refused to catch. The walls echoed with absence. Jonas sat at the table, hands clasped, eyes on the chair she'd used. It was ridiculous, he thought, how something as small as a shawl missing from the peg could feel like an open wound. By noon, the rain had turned to mist. He tried to eat, couldn't. Tried to work, couldn't. The silence pressed on him, a weight he'd thought he'd buried years ago. When he finally saddled the horse, he didn't tell himself it was to check the fence or scout the river. He just rode, heart hammering like it remembered something his mind had forgotten, that people don't leave to be safe. They leave to be remembered. He found the wagon near the dry creek bed, stuck in the mud. Nora was standing beside it, hair plastered to her face, eyes red but steady. The children huddled inside, frightened but alive. You were right, she said, voice thin. The river rose. I usually am. She tried to smile. Failed. What now? Jonas dismounted, walked past her, and started pushing the wagon free. Now, he said between grunts, we go home. It took both of them to lift the wheel from the mire, but when it finally rolled forward, the sound it made wasn't strain, it was relief. As they started back, the rain eased into drizzle. Nora looked at him, half smiling now. You didn't have to come. He met her gaze, eyes soft but sure. Yeah, he said. I did. Behind them, the desert exhaled. The sky began to clear, and for the first time since the storm began, a thin line of sunlight broke through, touching the road ahead, a promise, fragile but real. They reached Crow Ranch by dusk. The rain had stopped, leaving the earth slick and shining like new skin. Smoke rose faintly from the chimney, a sign Jonas had left behind, that even when he thought he'd lost everything, he'd kept the fire alive. Nora helped the children inside, stripped off their wet shoes, and set them near the hearth. The baby's cheeks flushed again, color returning like hope. Jonas closed the door behind them, bolting it with a sound that felt final. The storm had washed something clean in both of them, but what came next would test the truth of that. He hung his coat on the peg, the one she'd used, and spoke without turning. Marshall Everett's coming back, probably tomorrow. She didn't flinch. Then we'll be ready. He looked at her over his shoulder. You don't understand. He's got the law behind him. All I've got is land and a name nobody trusts. Then borrow my name, she said simply. I've got nothing to lose. Jonas gave a dry, humorless laugh. That's exactly what scares me. For a moment, silence thickened between them. The children stirred, whispering, then fell quiet again. The fire cracked, a soft punctuation in the room. Nora stepped closer. You think I'm running from the law? I'm running from being forgotten. That's worse. Jonas looked at her then, really looked the dirt under her nails, the scar on her chin, the strength in the way she stood despite the trembling. You want to stay here? I want to live somewhere my name doesn't have to start with sorry. He took off his hat, ran a hand through his hair, exhaled. If you stay, it won't be easy. The ground's dry, fence breaks every other week. Winters bite. I've had worse, she said. At least here, I know what I'm fighting for. He nodded once, a small surrender disguised as agreement. The next morning, he rode into town before sunrise. The children watched from the porch as he disappeared into the horizon, a dark figure against the new light. Nora busied herself fixing breakfast, but every sound, the clatter of pans, the wind through the window felt like waiting. When he returned, his shirt was torn, mud up to his knees. He dropped a folded paper on the table. What is it? She asked. Custody papers, he said. Filed and signed. Her eyes widened. They let you? Not exactly. He sat down, the chair creaking under his weight. Everett made me a deal. I take responsibility. Full guardianship. Means the ranch is under county watch till it's proven fit. If one thing goes wrong, food, school, health, they take it all back. She unfolded the paper, fingers trembling. His signature sprawled across the bottom like a vow written in dirt and blood. You risked everything, she said quietly. He met her gaze. You think Mercy's free? Something in her chest broke open then. Not fear, not gratitude, but something older, deeper. The kind of respect that only grows in soil watered by sacrifice. That afternoon they worked together, mending the fence. Jonas hammered while Nora steadied the boards. The sun climbed high, relentless but clean. Every strike of the hammer sounded like punctuation to a prayer neither of them knew how to say aloud. At one point, Lucy ran out with a jug of water, offering it up with both hands. Jonas took a sip, handed it to Nora, and smiled just barely. It was enough. By evening, the ranch looked different. Not perfect, not even whole, but alive. The children helped gather eggs, laughter spilling across the yard. Nora fixed supper, humming an old hymn she barely remembered the words to. Jonas sat on the porch, watching the horizon soften into gold. When Everett's car appeared again in the distance, the air grew still. Jonas stood, wiped his hands, and met him halfway up the path. The marshal got out, tipping his hat. Heard you filed papers. Seems that way, Jonas said. You understand what you signed? I understand better than most men. Everett studied him, then looked past at the children chasing each other through the yard. County clerk says it's provisional. 90 days inspection. You fail, they're gone. Jonas nodded. Then I won't fail. The lawman hesitated, maybe out of respect, maybe out of doubt. You sure this is what you want, Crow? You could walk away right now. Keep your land clean. Jonas's voice was steady. Land's just dirt. He motioned toward the porch where Nora stood holding the baby. This is what makes it worth keeping. Everett stared a long moment, then tipped his hat again. You always were stubborn. Still am, Jonas said. When the car pulled away, dust curling behind it, Nora came down the steps. What did he say? Jonas looked at her, eyes tired but bright. He said we've got 90 days to prove we're a family. She smiled. The kind that starts small but grows honest. Guess we'd better make it count. That night, after the children slept, they sat outside, again same steps, same silence, but different hearts. The stars spread wide across the black, unashamed in their distance. Jonas broke the quiet first. You know, I used to think discipline was the only thing keeping me alive. She turned to him. And now? He looked at the glowing horizon, at the faint outline of the fence they'd rebuilt. Now, I think maybe kindness is harder. You have to fight for it every day. She nodded. Then we fight. He glanced at her, half smiling. You really think you belong here? I already do, she said. And so do you. M. The desert wind carried their laughter soft, rare, real. Inside the house, the fire burned steady, and the papers on the table dried where the rain had smudged them. The ink still legible, the name still joined. For the first time in years, Jonas Crow didn't feel like a man guarding the past. He felt like a man building something fragile, unfinished, but his, and somewhere deep within him, a quiet voice, maybe memory, maybe mercy, whispered the same truth Nora had known all along. Home isn't found. It's made, one promise at a time. Summer came slow to Crow Ranch, like a man learning to trust again. The rains left the desert green for the first time in years. Wildflowers rose between the fence posts they had fixed together, small bursts of color defying the dry earth. The river ran fuller now, carving new paths through the valley, proof that even land can heal if it's given time. The days found a rhythm. Jonas mended tack in the barn, while Nora hung laundry in the wind. The children raced each other through the corral, their laughter scattering the dust like music. Sometimes, when she called them in for supper, Jonas would pause mid-hammer, just to listen. He never said it aloud, but that sound had become the heartbeat of the place. Every evening, they ate by the window. The sun would slide down behind the ridge, staining the sky in golden rose, and for a moment, the whole world seemed to hold its breath. There were still hard days, fences breaking, bills piling, the past knocking now and then, but those things no longer felt like punishments. They were simply life, shared. One night, long after the children had gone to bed, Nora stepped onto the porch. The air was cool, the stars sharp. Jonas was already there, boots propped on the railing, a cup of coffee cooling in his hands. Judge signed off this morning, he said. 90 days passed clean. We're official now. She smiled, quiet and wide. How's it feel? He took a slow sip. Strange, peaceful, like standing still and not wanting to move. She sat beside him. You earned it. He shook his head. No. We built it. Earnings for money, buildings for living. They sat without words for a while, watching the horizon fade to silver. Somewhere inside, Lucy murmured in her sleep, a sound that made Nora smile. Jonas reached into his pocket and pulled out a small carved horse, the one he'd made months ago, worn smooth by time. He placed it on the porch rail between them. For the boy, he said. But I figured it belongs here now. Nora touched the carving gently. You ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't stopped that day? He looked out at the fields, the fence, the thin line of smoke rising from their chimney. Every day, he said. And every day, I thank the wind for pushing me off the road. She leaned back, eyes closing, a faint smile ghosting her lips. You know, Jonas, sometimes the storm isn't sent to break us. He glanced at her. No? Sometimes it's sent to show us who's still willing to stand in the rain. He didn't answer, but his hand found hers on the bench, rough palm against soft skin, and the silence between them said everything. The wind moved through the mesquite trees, carrying the smell of rain long past. The world had gone quiet again, but this time, it was the kind of quiet that comes after laughter, after forgiveness, after choosing to stay. And in that stillness, Crow Ranch breathed easy, alive in every small sound, a place reborn, not from luck or mercy, but from two people who refused to give up on the simple, stubborn grace of love. If this story found a quiet place in you tonight, stay a little longer. Out here, we tell stories about people who've lost everything and still choose to be kind. If you felt that warmth, share this story with someone who needs to remember what staying looks like. And if you'd like to walk this road with us again, don't forget to subscribe to NoNe Wild West Saga. There's always another fire waiting to be lit, another heart learning how to heal in the silence. Until next time, ride gentle and take care of the good in you.